Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining today's webinar. I think we can start now for the webinar. So today we are talking about rethinking early childhood education. So we are from GRC, Gifted Education Resource Consultancy. Our mission is actually to help the Singapore as well as Asia gifted kids in the development needs as well as the parents of gifted children. At the same time, we're also working with childcare centers and other education institutes in terms of consultancy to help them meet the needs of their students and their students' parents. So today, we have Dr. Juliana Tay, who will be talking about rethinking early childhood education and how to differentiate for gifted children. So, Juliana, please take away.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So the topic for today is on rethinking early childhood education and meeting the needs of children with gifts and talents in the childcare centers and early childhood education centers in Singapore. So I'm going to use examples from Singapore for when I share with you some options and differentiation strategies. So here's the topic. So a bit about me. So my education, I'm a PhD in education studies, specializing in gifted education, specializing in visual arts gifted education. I'm trained in Purdue University in the US, where I did my PhD and my master's. But prior to that, I'm also an MOE trained teacher. I worked in Singapore for 11 years before going overseas to do my PhD and looking at how can I serve my students better. So my work is basically when I was in Singapore, I was a subject head in Marsiling Secondary and Raffles Institution. So those where I was in charge of the art programs, the visual arts program for highly able students. And then over in the US, I work for the Gifted Education Research and Resource Institute. I'm the coordinator for youth program, and I run enrichment program for young children as well as summer camps for young children aged between 4 to 10. That will be the age group of the most of the children I work with. I do also assist with the older kids as well. So we have summer camps for all the way to college, junior college, high school level children. But the bulk of my work is with young children, as you can see with the photograph. This is with a group of kindergarten children where we do some bubbles experiments to teach them about engineering thinking and engineering design. So what is it about the GERC? So in GERC, we have this what we call the GERC approach, where we believe that gifts and talents come in many forms and they don't manifest at predetermined age. Meaning my children are not gifted only when they reach primary 3 where we test for giftedness. The children with gifts and potentials are already there. What we need to do is to provide research-based strategies and resources to parents and educators to help them realize their gifts and talents. So with young children especially, what can we do to keep that spark going and not drown it out before when they enter primary school and when they reach primary 3 and sit down for the formalized MOE gifted GEP exam. So what we can do? So basically one strategies that we talk about is always differentiation. So what does research say about differentiation is that it improves students' learning behaviors and motivation to learn. It helps students achieve at higher level, and it helps more students. So we always want to think about it as it's not just serving only children who are highly able, but students who are average, students who are challenged in their learning. You can always differentiate up and lower. So you can promote better learning at the level that students need. Especially with educators, you are very concerned about the ZPD, the zone of proximal development. So you want to make sure that the learning that you design for your students are designed at the zone where they are able to handle, where they are stretched, but not that they feel that they are totally helpless and can't achieve. So that way, if you can think of a classroom, you're going to have the whole spectrum of students in that sense. So that's why we want to talk about it, is how can we help more students to achieve at a higher level and not just at the high level. So students who had a slower head start will be able to still push ahead and challenge themselves. And of course, when you have students who are engaged, you have students who are learning, you're going to have students who are happy, and you're going to have better classroom management in that sense. So it's also one of the findings that the teachers who are able to differentiate their classroom or differentiate their lessons better will find themselves having a better classroom management. So is it difficult to do? And this is something that teachers is always worried about. Is this going to add on to the workload that I'm currently in? I've already had 10 kids or 10 screaming kids right now. So is this going to be difficult? So what we want to say is it is not new. Basically, most teachers differentiate. It's just that it's not something that's conscious in their thinking. They don't actively think about how they can differentiate and what groups are they looking for, what are the things they are looking for. They just do it as natural because you teach that way. You don't just teach to one student, especially when a group, you do differentiate to different students and you know which are your students. So it is not new. It is not addition to what the teachers are already doing. So the thing that I would say is it makes you more aware. It makes we are asking for teachers to think about it in a more conscientious manner, to be more aware of the different ways they can differentiate and not just always group the students this way or group the students that way. So there's a better repertoire of strategies that they can use. And it's not only for students with gift and talent. So what I said, this is rethinking, helping children with GT students in the classroom. Generally speaking, differentiation helps all students. But the ones who need it the most are the two extreme ends. The GT kids who needs to be challenged and pushed further, and the weaker kids who needs the scaffolding and support to bring them up to the level that they need to achieve. Basically, what we encourage is for all teachers to use different strategies in the classroom and that focus on students' strengths, interests, and talent. And this is something that is very important for differentiation, is to recognize that your students all are different and they have different strengths, interests, and talents. And these are different ways to consider students when you plan your lesson or when you group your students or when you do design some questions. To think about what are the students' interests, how can you capture the students' interest into the lesson, how can you tap on the students' strengths or talents. The other thing that we talk about is how this can be done through grouping to meet the diverse need of the students. As we know, the best type of coaching is one-to-one, where you really talk to this one child and you really focus on what the child needs to learn and challenge and things like that. But that's not possible in a early childhood education.
Yes. Yes.
So it's not possible in the early childhood situation and such. So what we want to think about is how can we use grouping to make it easier for the teachers to meet the diverse needs. So how can we identify the different groups of students that you have within your classroom, and then how can we use the different strategies to help the development in that sense. So how does this work with young children? So what I'm going to share now is one strategy or one type of grouping method that I'm very familiar with, total school cluster grouping. Why I was recommend this method is simply because this is a research-based method that I worked on for the past 5 years. It's part of the federal Javits grant, which is a U.S. federal grant that provides research on gifted education for children. So this works within the regular school structure. So I'm not asking you to throw out what you are doing in your kindergartens or your early childhood centers. I'm asking you to use this on top of or together with your regular school structure. What it focuses, and the research has shown much positivity. I've worked with teachers, I do site visits to the schools, so I'm very familiar with this topic. And if you want to know more or extensively, we can talk about this at a later stage. But how does this work? So it works within your regular school structure. So what I'm saying is now we're going to look at how we're going to regroup your students. So basically it looks at the performance and placement of every student in the school. So in your center, maybe you have 60 to 100 students, and then we're going to know of every child where they stand in terms of performance and in terms of achievement. So we're going to look at that. And then it looks at staff development. This is very important. I always tell my teachers, it's like, it's not because, this can't work just because you place your students in group, just because you cluster them as high ability. All your students will learn, miraculously and brilliantly and perform at high level. It doesn't work. Your staff has to be trained. There has to be a development for them to learn how to work with this group of students, to design curriculum, to design lessons that meets these students' needs. Same thing. You have to train the staff how to work with the general with the tier N students as well. the average or below average students as well. Those students also need the support and things like that. And you're gonna find a different kind of thinking among yourself. Some teachers really prefer working with the high end students because they like challenging the students further. They like pushing the boundaries of the lessons to see how they can expand the students' work and such. Whereas there are also teachers who's going to enjoy helping. Teachers who want to work with the slow learners to teach them how to read, to master the alphabets, to master the content at the level that they should be mastering. So we're going to look at staff development in both ends in that sense, and so that it can be helped. And this is about flexible placement of students. Very key point is that the students are not locked in place, meaning every year when I review the students, I will look at, or even every, how do I put it, every semester, because in childcare, the children change so much and so fast. I will relook at the students' of behaviors and abilities and assessment, and then relook at where should they be, which teacher should they work with. Some students, you will see that they are highly advanced in reading. That's because they have your parents who reads to them every day, every night. And some students, when they come to you, they hardly ever see a book, or touch a book. So in that sense, how can you place your students once they are able to learn, to grasp the language? How can you relook at how to place them, how to challenge them and stretch them further? And those who are advanced in reading may not have the same kind of advance or talent, I would say, in math or other areas. So the students will move around to go to the suitable groups that they work at within their zone. So it's very flexible, it's very fluid. I do not group students simply by age. This is something that we need to think about. So it's a talent development model. So again, our focus is always talent development. I do not believe that intelligence is stagnant. I do not believe that talent is stagnant. It's all a matter of how can you help a child to develop ahead and develop in a more advanced, to push them, to challenge them at a more advanced level. And then of course, in the classroom, if you have 10 students or 15 students, you're going to have all kinds of spectrum. But if you're able to group them in certain manner, the teachers will have a smaller group of students to work with, therefore giving more time to individual students. And that's always a good thing for teachers and the students. So how can this be done? So like I said, yearly identification or maybe each semester for young children. This is simply because young children grow so fast, and a lot of time it's the lack of exposure to certain materials or certain topics that hinders them rather than something that can't be done. And this is something that I see with the work I've done in the US as well. When I work with young children or with parents, I have parents who are very concerned whether their children will be able to handle the advanced material that we use in our classroom. And my answer to the parents will always be, do not worry. I have a very good teacher in the classroom with 10 students, and I have an assistant with the teacher as well. So the teacher will be able to work with the students at the level to help them to bring it up. And with that kind of support system in place, I hardly ever see any children suffer any kind of trauma because they can't do or cannot achieve and they have to drop the class in that sense. So it's very much how can we help to scaffold the learning better for the children in that sense. So yearly identification, and move them around where they need to be. Flexible grouping between classes and among grade levels. So for example, if you're running 2 to 3 classes of K1, you may have one class with more high ability students in there who are reading at a higher level where your teachers are challenging them differently. And the other group may have the average, and another class may have a lower group. So I'm not so that we don't put the very low students with the very high students, because end of the day you're gonna have a problem with the social emotional development for the two groups. So there is a specific grouping methods that we will recommend and don't recommend, so that to make sure that every child is challenged but not demoralized. And this is very important, especially with early childhood children, because they are growing and they are first time experiencing and seeing a lot of things. So if you put them in places where they keep seeing themselves as failures or doing not as well as other kids, there will be a trauma on them. They will feel demoralized in learning, and sometimes they just give up and they start playing a fool or creating a mess in the classroom. So that kind of situation we will try to avoid through flexible grouping And it's not only between the classes. We're going to see sometimes students who are reading at K2 level when they're in nursery school. So nursery one. And that is rare, but possible as well. So are you going to put this person who reads at a K2 level and put them with the nursery students who are sometimes still struggling with the alphabets? So things to consider is if they can be challenged at a higher grade level, why not? Yes, when they get to kindergarten, the teacher may have some problem because they will have covered everything, but that's where the differentiation comes in as well. How can you still continue to provide the challenge that this kid needs to learn? And there's always ways you can go. So we talk about flexible grouping strategies based on readiness and interest. So how ready are they? How do you group the students who are ready about the same topics? Or they can work with their peer groups, and this can be interest. Your students who are interested in machineries. We will talk about that all in this group, and then students who are more interested in plants or bio or animals, they can be another group. So you focus them on different interests, and they're still learning the same topics. They're still doing the same materials, but just with a different focus. And I'll provide you with more example later. Lastly, professional development in gifted education strategies for all teachers. This is very important. This is something that drives me nuts when I was teaching in MOE, because I started my years in MOE with the neighborhood schools, Marsiling Secondary. It's really a brand new schools. We have really the tail ends, well, I would say tail end students, but very average students. You have your normal ACAD, normal tech, and you have your low end express students. And then when I went over to RI, Reference Institution, to work, and I realized that the teachers, and we are given a course on teaching strategies to work with GT students, and I realized that many of the strategies that I was introduced to in RI are so are very much applicable to my teaching in Marsiling as well. And in fact, my students who are in the normal tech would benefit so much if I've known all these strategies prior. However, because of the ideas that gifted education strategies are catered to gifted students, many of us teachers who are trained are not familiar. We know roughly that there's something like this, but we are not exactly familiar, and it's not ingrained in us to do it. So that was one of the big reasons why I was propelled to join to pursue my master's and my PhD, because I simply believe there's a better way to teach out there. And in the US, this has shown to be true, that we are now trying to very much to push the strategies that we are using in gifted education for all teachers in all schools, especially now in the US, where a lot of gifted programs are being slashed and being cut and being removed. Gifted budget is almost non-existent. The teachers in the general classroom have no choice but to take in all these children who are highly able in their regular classroom, and they are struggling, which is why we are now looking at how can we provide better professional development in all these strategies to all teachers in the classrooms. And early childhood is also an important area that we are looking at. So it's very important to do this. One thing that teachers are always concerned about is, are we tracking the students? Are we labeling the students? This is important, and this is something I must drive home, that these categories are only to help us with placing the students into the appropriate classrooms at the appropriate level. That's not definitive, it's not permanent, and it's not an indicator of expectations. Simply because I say you are average and you will be okay with the MOE curriculum at this current MOE level, doesn't mean that I only expect you to perform at this level. I'm expecting you to do better so that I can see how else I can challenge you further. So that is the expectation part. I'm not saying that just because you are the general students or you're the lower end students, therefore I will not expect you to do anything special. You still can challenge yourself, you still can perform, but just to recognize that your starting point is further than the students who are in GT, who are the GT students. So it's not fair if I'm going to say, oh, I expect a normal or the average students to perform as high level as a GT student, because the starting point will be very different. Similarly, the GT students will have their strength and their areas of it that they need to work on. So it is not definitive. So sometimes they will be like, if they are very good in math, some of them are extraordinary when it comes to identifying number patterns or figuring out patterns. But when it comes to addition, when it comes to the drill and practice of things, when it comes to handwriting, for example, they may not be all that great. And this is where we recognize that the children are developing and they are not, the talent or the advancement they show is not definitive nor permanent, and they can be assigned to different classroom or different teachers in that sense to meet the needs that they have at the level they need. So what does it look like? And this is where I'm going to use the Nurturing Early Learners curriculum by MOE. And I'm going to use the one, I'm going to show you two different examples. This is the one on language and literacy. Why I use MOE curriculum is simply very simple. It's available on the internet. I don't know whether this is something that's adopted by a lot of the early childhood center out there, but if you have other examples that you want me to take a look at and things like that, we can talk about this further. But this is something that is situated by MOE, and this is how I'm going to show you. So one of their learning goals for language and literacy is listen for information enjoyment. So the example provided in the curriculum is read a story, rhyme, or poem with repetitive phrases. And that's it. In fact, the Dr. Seuss early reader like Cats in Hat and Fox in Socks is recommended by me because those stories has the repetitive words that is similar to a rhyme and poem that you can use. And of course, you can use other nursery rhymes that's used in your center. But this is a very basic example provided. So this will be what I consider to be a general level, achievable by all students. You're gonna have students who are highly able, who are reading at a more advanced level simply because their parents read to them or they are talented in learning the language. They have great language mastery. With this group of students, I would say advance it further by using simple phrases. So not just repetitive, but also simple. So if you think of the story of the little red hen, they keep repeating the phrase, then I shall do it myself, said the little red hen. Then I shall do it myself. So there is a repetition and the story is a lot richer and it has actually a really beginning. You have the standard story structure where you have the introduction, the main story and the conclusion at the end, so that the students are able to get familiar with the whole idea of folk tales, how a story structure looks like and such. So the students you can challenge the students further that way. And of course, the gingerbread man, I'm sure you're all familiar with, run as fast as you can. And the three little pigs, Huff and Puff. So these are some examples for differentiation at a higher level in terms of readiness. And if your students are even more advanced than that, then you have to look at what kind of story, what kind of situation they are in. There's one of the questions that I thought that you might have is how do you know what level of students you have in the classroom? In the first week or so of lessons, you'll probably be able to tell which are the students who show the different abilities they have, whether it's reading or writing or math. And this is how you do a simple pre-assessment. You get them to read, or you read to them and you assess their attention, how whether they're able to answer the question that you ask, and then you place them. So what I would say some teachers or are concerned is that after I take the students are attached to me and things like that. But if the students are taught that they are going to work with all teachers, if the students have this mindset that they're going to move from group to group, there's no stigma when they are transferred from one group to another group. It simply means that they are going to work with another friends for this time of the year. And then, another time after you do assessment, they may shift to another group. So that way, teachers who are concerned that, the attachment they have to their children or the children attachment to them, you can slightly reduce it, and that allows the teachers to know all kids better. One of the greatest concerns that teachers always have is that, but the students already know me, I already know the students. Yes, but you can know the rest of students as well. And once you start knowing the students, you will know roughly where everybody is in terms of development, and will be able to better equip the lesson to teach them, to work with them. Okay, another lessons that I have is Discover the World, again by MOE curriculum, and this one is on the learning goal to find out why things happen and how things works through simple investigation. So examples they provide is observing snails and how snails move on different surface. So again, this not new. This curriculum actually was look at it as like, that's something that we do in our Icky Sticky Fun class in the US as well. But we actually teach the students the words to use. So rather than just say, how the snails move on the different surface, we actually talk to them about designing their own experiment. So we talk to them about forming their own hypothesis, running experiment, making observation, coming to a conclusion, and presenting their results, so that the students are taught the scientific thinking, the steps. And then, of course, when we do math and or engineering materials or STEM materials, then we'll talk about the engineering thinking. So the students are familiar with the words. Don't be afraid to use big words with the students. They don't have to spell it all the time. They don't even have to enunciate it correctly. But them knowing the words, you're going to see students who are more advanced, who are more geared towards language learning. They are able to pick those words up very quickly, and they understand the meaning, and they are able to use it. And that's how you help children to think ahead and advance themselves as well. So students who are, again, more advanced, I would say design your own experiments. Talk about friction. Talk about how can you improve the experiment. What's wrong, because if you're using snails, you're going to use different snails. You're going to use different surface. What's the design flaw in the experiments? You can talk about using inanimate objects where you can standardize. You can make sure everything's as fair as possible. So you can use simple language, you can use the advanced language. Again, it depends on how ready your students are. Students who are average will, if they are able to play with the snails and let it crawl along the plank and the surface, that will be fine. But you can always design very different experiments. The ones we did in US is we use a plank and we flow down water, honey, maple syrup, and we don't use peanut butter anymore, simply because there's too much peanuts allergy around. But we use marmalade and things like that. So the students make a guess, like which of the 3 items or 4 items flows the fastest, and then why they say that, and then they'll run the experiments, and of course they enjoy making themselves sticky and icky. Lastly, you can also talk about observation by differentiation by interest. So if you have big groups of students, sometimes it's hard for students to do the experiments and to see what. And you're going to have students who are icky about snails as well. So you can, after showing the snails, you still can get them to investigate other things. So observe and investigate plants, flowers, food items. Learning how to make observation is a skill. The item itself is secondary. So that's where you can group the students in different ways. If you're asking them to record down what they see, then again, that is the skill you are focused. The items is the option part, and that's where you again can group them by interest or what the kids want to do. Sometimes you may want to do an intralizer to ask the kids, like, what are their favorite things and such. So you can group them, like people with the same favorite things can group together and they can talk and share and do the investigation together. And the students who are interested in other things can group together. So they have the chance and opportunity to work in different groups, as well as with different levels of students. So they are not always in the same homogeneous groups of high ability students. If you're grouping them by interest, often you'll find you have a spectrum in that, because students generally do have common interests no matter what performance level they are in. So with that, here's I'm going to pass this over to Darius, so he can share with you on the slides here. Darius, are you there?
Hello. Okay. Thank you for listening to the webinar. Actually, this slide is supposed to be for you, Juliana, but it's okay. I take this one. So, why do you need to differentiate, or when do you need the center to differentiate? Now, if your classes are grouped by age and not by ability, or if your students come in different levels of ability, or if the students face challenges in classroom management due to the different learning speed of the students, all these are signs that your center would need to differentiate based on what Juliana says. So, in the next slide, sorry, Juliana, next slide. Okay, so how can we help? Now, let's face it, most of our thinking, as a business owner, if some of you are business owners, is that if it's not broken, why fix it? But you do not want to be Nokia. I'm not too sure if any of you remember Nokia, but Nokia used to be a major handset manufacturer way back in this mere 5 to 10 years ago. But they waited too long to change. And when they realized that they are behind the smartphone market, they still were saying that they were already a burning platform, things were not going well, and it was too late for them to change already. So for a childcare center situation in Singapore, since 2016, they have been growing at the rate of about 15% up to now. So we're talking about a huge increase in childcare centers in Singapore. I took a walk around my neighborhood and I can see about 4 or 5 within walking distance. This means your parents are now spot for choice. Not only that, the government themselves are already putting their hands into the basket. And as we all know, the moment the government puts their hands in any industry, you expect a significant disruption in terms of pricing, in terms of enrollment, in terms of the sheer number of choices available. So my suggestion is this: you may have no issues now with enrollment, you may have no issues now with parents, but do not wait until you have a problem, because by then you may find that it's really too late. Your enrollment is by the year, it's not by the quarters, it's not by the month. So sometimes the changes required may take a bit more of time to implement. If you think you need some help in doing this, please feel free to approach us. So how can we help in that sense? We can help you implement differentiation strategies for your curriculum. And this will help increase your parent satisfaction and testimonials. Let's put it this way: if you have more children coming out of your centers who are gifted in the future, they may become predominant scientists. They may find a cure for COVID-19 for all we know. All this will give you the leverage you need to make your center, even if you're part of a chain, to be one step ahead of all the other people around you. Of course, we have GRC, Advanced Classroom Management for Teachers. Now, as Julian mentioned, to keep the students happy is one of the key things we want to see in the education scene in Singapore. So if your teachers are able to adopt advanced classroom management, they can handle the kids better, they have lower stress, and I believe you also experience a lower turnaround for your teachers as well, because they will be able to manage the classroom and have time for high order thinking and not just be doing day-to-day management of problem kids or gifted kids or what's not. And of course, if you're interested in adopting some of our programs, we have a GRC Talent Development Program. This one, Juliana was a coordinator in Purdue University, handling all the programs for the gifted children, and it was very popular. We are talking about parents sending their kids all the way from Asia to the US just to attend these sessions. And it's been proven by research that these sessions expand the mind of the students who attend it. So if you're interested in having this program run in your center as a way of differentiating yourself from your standard enrichment, your speech and drama, your English, your maths courses, we are able to help you to work with you to run the enrichment programs in your center. So feel free to approach us if you require all these services. And last but not least, if you have anything which you do not, which is not in this list, or you feel you need help in certain areas, or you just want to talk to somebody who is experienced in teaching gifted children, please contact us for no obligation discussion. Our website is at grc-sg.com. I will send out an email after this to all the attendees with our contact information. So if you need someone to chat with and someone to talk to, please feel free to approach us. So thank you very much for your attention. Now we are on the Q&A session. So we have a couple of questions which has been asked. Juliana, what's the first question? How long would it take to implement differentiation strategy in a classroom environment?
How long does it take? Let's see. In the classroom environment, what I would say first, we will need the teachers to work out what are the lesson objectives and what are the different groups of students they have, and then they just have to teach. It's regular teaching. It's just the planning will be different now. Is that in the sense that you are now planning more consciously, thinking of which group of students are these questions or activities suitable for, which group of students are these different sets suitable for. So I would say if you have your lesson plans and everything in place, they will be just sitting down and looking through the lesson plans to see how can you redesign it and then using it. That's all. I can't really tell you. I don't know how long does the center does to implement the various lesson plans that they have. So it varies. Varies from center to center.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question. Are you able to certify early childhood educators? Is that what GRC does?
No, this is not something that we do. We don't provide any certification per se. What we do is really just to help the teachers in terms of training. So I have I'm certified by MOE to be a trainer. So I have that, and I'm a teacher, and of course I have my paper qualification as well. So what I can do is, and in the US, this is something that we do as well. We go down to schools and we work with the teachers. The teachers will bring in their lesson plan. We'll run a clinic. So the teachers will bring in their lessons, and they tell me like, okay, this is the lesson that I teach. So how can I make sure that I cover the different groups of students? I've not worked, so I've worked with the students in in elementary school in the sense. So we look at the lesson and we look at how can we use the lesson, same lesson, tweak it to challenge the high ability students and tweak it to support the lower end students as well.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, the other question is this. This person asks, does my school has no gifted children? So why would I need to differentiate in the classroom? Does it make any sense to differentiate if I have no gifted children in the school?
Okay, so this is something, one thing is that we notice I will always use the word children with gifts and talents and not gifted children, because the gifted children is a very, what I would call arcane thinking. Children with gifts and talents, to recognize that children have different gifts and different talents. And they all have that. It's just whether it's recognized or not. So especially at young age, some examples I can give you is that children who have never been read a book, you're gonna have some children. If you're working in neighborhood centers and you've been working with the poorer estates and such, you're gonna have students who never actually have a storybook in their life. They never hear their parents read to them or something. Their form of entertainment or stories come from YouTube or TV shows, TV dramas. So when you introduce to them printed words, books, they're going to be, they will look very different from students who have the access. So in that sense, you're going to have to think about your children in not exactly whether they are gifted or not, but where their potential is. So all students have the potential to learn and what you can do to challenge them further. So students who are already starting in the, starting point that's far further behind, they're going to need more support to catch up. This is where you can think about the differentiation. And students who are on the starting line needs a different type of support. And students who are advanced, they may not be tested gifted, but they are advanced in reading. In fact, I usually would tell my parents, I do not recommend testing children, too early as well, because students are still growing. But if they are advanced, how can you push them further? They may not be gifted in reading today, but they might be another month down the road. They might have, once given the opportunity or the challenge to push, they might display the ability and the talent to grow at a much higher rate. So it's about potential to grow rather than certified giftedness that we are looking at and developing with differentiation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. This is interesting. How would I know if the child is gifted? The parents keep saying that the child is gifted and insist that the child should be treated specially. What do I do?
This is very interesting. Yes, I have so many parents who come and tell me that, because, okay, remember I told you my experience in Purdue. I work with early childhood and I work with 4 years old. Can you imagine 4 years old, your pre-K class? So I have parents with a 3-year-old children, and with 3-year-old, or they are not even 4 yet, and who comes to us and say their child has been certified gifted, they want to take the class. There is a reasonable amount of leeway that I'll give to parents, but there's something that I will not do. For example, I will never put a pre-K children or K children in an elementary classroom. So I will not, even if they're tested gifted, they're certified gifted. At kindergarten level, I will not put them in the first grade classroom or second grade classroom because of the motor skills. So what I always tell the parents is that, yes, your child may be gifted. However, the motor skills, a 4-year-old, the ability to handle a pair of scissors, to hold pencils or color pencils, is still at a 4-year-old stage. They will never be the same level as a primary 2 student. If that's the case, and I put them in a more advanced class, your child is only going to suffer and be demoralized when they see how other children are drawing and writing at the speed and at the ability that they are not capable of doing, simply because of physical development. Nothing to do with their mental ability. The child can learn. Children are often like a sponge. They can learn at an amazing rate. However, your physical development limits where they can be in terms of growth. So I will say yes. Even if I tell you you can shift a nursery kid to a kindergarten class, I will say that only for topics or the areas that you know that you do not need a certain demand of the kids. So if the parents thinks that the children is advanced, what we can do is, in what areas are the children learning faster? And what you can do is very simple. Yes, if your acknowledge that the child may be advanced in reading as compared to their peers, maybe, or whatever examples the parents have as comparison, provide additional reading materials. So things like, I would say, again, some examples I give you, challenge them with higher level books and such. If the parent is willing to take up the extra slack of reading to the kids, all this extra reading that you assign to the kid, why not? If it will only help the child in that sense. If the parents see that it's too much work and their child not being, turning off or being bored, the parents will know and they will know when to stop. Right now, it's because they felt that their child is not being challenged or pushed hard enough, that they want the extra materials from the school and they want to work with the school in that sense. Yeah.
Great. One question. Actually, a couple of questions in a row. So, do you believe in checking children's learning through spelling? My center believe in giving spelling to children from nursery to, and is it necessary? If not, what alternative strategy would you suggest?
Yes and no. I can see where your center is coming from, because very low in Singapore system, spelling is a big thing, especially when they get to primary one and primary schools, you get spelling weekly and monthly and things like that. We spell check around, sometimes parents, even I question like, why do I need to learn to spell? The spell check will figure it out. But you must remember, end of the day, you are what the children that you are teaching right now are going to step into a school system that demands spelling. So yes, I don't believe that you can identify intelligence via spelling, because that's a rote learning habit. But yes, I believe that is a habit that the children needs to master, so that they will be able to handle elementary school better or primary school better. So that is something that is you cannot avoid, because I have not seen a primary school that don't use that doesn't do spelling, or for the matters, yeah. So it's something that the kids will probably have to do. So rather than throwing them into primary one and then suddenly they're like, oh no, what on earth is this? You can start scaffolding them with it in early childhood. Whether it's a measure of intelligence, I would say no, because it is just a learning strategy. It is just through rote learning. Not saying that rote learning is bad. Research has shown that there's time for lecturing and rote learning, but there's also time for investigation and inquiry teaching and thinking strategies and things like that. So it needs to be a balance. Students who are highly able sometimes really detest rote learning. They really hate having to force to sit down. But you do need to explain to the children sometimes that these are skills that you need to have in order to work in order to move on in your education to the primary school. And students who are highly able, you'll be surprised at the thinking that they have, the maturity that sometimes that they have are amazing, and they understand things that they need to do and things that they enjoy doing. So even if you want to, you can think of your classroom or your center situation as, what do the students need to accomplish, and what can I do to make learning fun for them? And this needs to be it needs to be at a balance. You cannot just do everything that needs to be done, and it makes learning such a dry process, and it can't be all fun. Then how is the learning applicable to real life situation? It becomes very strange for the students.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we have time for one or two more questions. Okay, let's see. All right, here. How do you have a service to certify giftedness? I mean, my center has children, but if they come in straight off, they won't be able to know if they're gifted or not. Or do it depend on parents to tell us if they're gifted or not?
No, I won't depend on parents for sure, because parents have very limited. I won't say limited, but parents has well, I don't have a better word right now, but I have a limited view of the range of children and things like that. As a center owner, you have the say. Okay, you know your children in your center. The teachers know the children in the center. Where would this child stand among the children of their own peer group or the age group? I'll still go with age group first, because it's a way of motor skills. After that, you can shift them around in terms of teaching. But in the age group among their peers, where does this child stay? Is this child highly able compared to the rest? So what we this is what I call norm setting. So you compare them with your center norms, because again, in Singapore we do not certify children earlier than primary 3. Okay, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Both, everything comes in plus and minus. Good thing is, this way we can actually help more children than just those who are gifted. Bad thing is, because there's no certification, we do not know and we do not identify. We don't know who are gifted or not. But that allows the centers to decide who are the ones who are gifted. As long as you have a clear norm, that means you know students who are able to read at this level. These students are more highly able than the general population. Students who are reading at this level, these are your general population. Students who are reading at this level, they are the students who would need your support and scaffolding. As long as these norms is communicate clearly to the parents, to the teachers in your center, so that the teachers can know what to look out for. So when I'm doing my first lesson or first week of lesson with the students, straight away, oh, this child is reading advanced, or this child is asking more high level questions than the rest of the class. So this child, I will take a special note on this child, and this is a child that I will say, I would not say the child is gifted, but has the potential to be gifted or the potential to grow, has higher potential to grow in that sense. So you recognize the child is growing, you recognize the potential in the child, and you're providing the support needed by the child, rather than just labeling the child that's gifted and therefore, okay, he's not gifted.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all the time we have today. Thank you very much, Dr. Juliana, for her webinar on differentiated learning. So if there is any questions your audience may have, feel free to email her at juliana@grc-sg.com, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. All right, thank you very much. Have a good day, and see you again. Bye.
Thank you.